Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today is part 2 of the podcast we did with Chris and Jimmy of Nomad Airsoft, hosts of the BBs Don't Hurt podcast. They didn't have enough of us the first time, so they decided to come back for a second. They attended an operation a few weeks ago now called Operation Hidden Archer, and they were on the podcast to talk about how they were preparing for that event. And so now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of how the event went, how the prep helped you for that event, and to close the loop on some of the questions that we brought up the first time around. So thanks again for being here, lads. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I really want to get to the most important question that people have been asking us about. So Chris, was it 68 players or what, bud?
It was 69.
Nice.
It was 69.
Nice.
And it was weird. I was right with the 67, but then they added an XO to make it 68. And then we had, I don't know, what would you call him, Jimmy? That random supply dude that was driving the truck and would randomly shoot and randomly heal our guys to make it 69.
Oh, are you talking about the dude who chilled in the parking lot that we had to keep going back to? We kept getting ambushed at? Yeah, I don't know.
He was technically on our team and would heal people and shoot at the enemy, but at the same time, I think his job was just to drive the truck.
Okay.
Yeah, he's one of the, I don't know if you're familiar with Swamp Sniper. He's a big guy through Ballahack. He has a YouTube channel, pretty famous guy in this area. But I don't know if he owns Ballahack or if he's one of the main guys there, but it was him. And so I feel like it was just him.
Sniper?
Yeah, that was. Big tall guy. Beard.
Didn't even know that.
Yeah. I didn't know it until I started watching their YouTube videos and their Facebook videos. And I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, that's the guy behind the voice. But yeah.
So guys, let's get into it for real though. So I think, this the 68 69 question aside, I think what I really want to talk about is, let's talk about the event. Let's get into sort of what this was like. Just maybe you can start off by giving a sort of a high level summary of what the game was all about and how the game actually proceeded. Because when we talked last time, I think the conversation was around, well, it's, it was more of a scenario than a force on force, equal sides, just clashing into each other all day. So just curious to get sort of the overall view from you guys.
Yeah, so essentially it was kind of like we had assumed it would be in a way, where we started all off at the beginning and we were getting supplies down to our fob. We got ambushed, but while we were there, we also got to meet the townspeople who were the logging company. We found out that we weren't any sort of military force. We were actually the DOJ or something like that, I believe, in the end.
Okay.
And our job was to extract the people, find the intel that the enemy had hidden, and then eliminate whatever enemies we could to secure our extract. So we walked down, set up the fob. Then we got ambushed on the way there.
I was gonna say, you missed the biggest part there, dude.
Yeah, so we
started to walk down the MSR, got through the village, and towards the end of the village, we got ambushed, and our truck went down. So the truck carrying everything for the fob. And here's the other thing that I didn't understand was why Ballahack has a Trail Boss Chevy Silverado as one of their vehicles to get shot at on the airsoft field. I was like,
hey man,
you guys want to trade trucks? You can take mine. I'll take that.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
There's a lot of money out in Chesapeake.
That's true. We got ambushed, and we had to take all the supplies from the back of the truck, which I think was a few tents and a fold-up table to simulate the fob. We had to take that out and put it into it was the Gator, right, or whatever it was.
Yeah, so we had a little Gator, pretty much, just a little souped up golf cart, pretty much.
Yeah, basically with off-road tires. So put it in that, and then like bust out the fob, like bust out of the village and put up the fob.
Yeah.
And then from there it
And
was
so was it pretty much just like setting up the fob and then running missions out of that
Yeah.
basically for the day?
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So like
Right
the
on.
whole. Sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
I was gonna say it was pretty much like for anybody listening who's like been in military or combat arms or knows anything about it, it's like patrol base operations. You like set up a patrol base, and then how it usually goes is like one platoon at a time will go out and conduct missions. But here it's just kind of every platoon went out at the same time
Mhm.
and conducted like a combined arms mission. Like some dudes would go find intel, some dudes were finding weapons caches. We would go get resupply, and then you kind of cycle through who was doing what at each time. But yeah, so
I
then
think every team went into the town too once.
yeah. So yeah, that's all. I think they kind of had it cycled. So there's like three main spots that they would send us. It was like the town. There's a little village. They call it Cannibal Village, and then like through like the parking lot to get resupply, and then like each platoon would do one of those missions as you cycled around. So every platoon got to go to
Right.
every spot, kind of thing, and got to get the full experience, which was pretty cool.
So that's a really interesting concept because one of the things I've heard from other games is like, oh well, there's all these different missions, but you might not get to experience all of them or any of them in some
Mhm.
cases. Which by the sounds of it, you're experiencing whatever the three main like story arcs, I guess, are. But
Yeah.
were you rolling with the same guys like all day? Like obviously you two were rolling together, but like same crew the whole
Yep.
day.
Yep.
Yeah, so they split us up into 3 platoons, and you were with your platoon the whole time conducting any of the like patrols that went out. And the leadership for the platoons, okay, our leadership for the platoon was awesome. Actually, our platoon sergeant was a guy who's one of the cadre for Milsom West, so
Mhm.
he was
Mhm.
really good. And then our platoon leader was he current or former military? It seemed like he was
So
former or current.
our platoon leader was a Marine. I don't know what he did in the Marines.
I don't know.
And then our platoon sergeant was an arty guy. He was loyalty, which was artillery division at the 82nd. And I'm like, oh wait,
No,
I heard him talk
no,
about
other
it.
way around.
No,
Other way around. Yeah, Wally was the Marine.
no, yeah, that's what I meant.
You said
I can't
platoon
remember who
leader.
was what. I can't remember who
Oh,
was the PL
okay.
or the platoon
Yeah,
sergeant.
platoon sergeant was a Marine. I think
Yeah.
our platoon leader was an officer in the Army in the 82nd.
Yeah, I'm not sure. He was definitely artillery because he said something about being in loyalty, and that caught my ear because that's our artillery unit at Fort Bragg.
Gotcha.
I was like,
Okay.
oh, wait a minute. He was 319th. So
They were both great.
mhm.
I mean, granted, it also helped that we definitely had the best platoon.
Yeah.
But like when we do like company size movements, I think we only did what, 2 of them maybe. Even then,
Yeah,
like
pretty
we
much. At the
we
beginning
could
and at
hear
the
like
end.
yeah, we could hear like first platoon's platoon leader like legitimately yelling at them,
Mm.
like top of his lungs yelling, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I think I looked at Jimmy after probably like what, half an hour, and like I was like, dude, I'm so glad we're not in that platoon.
So one of the things we talked about last time, I remember, I'm surprised it was that guy shouting at people and not Jimmy, as we talked about last time.
No, he did.
Um,
Sorry, Jimmy shouted too.
I did a
but
little bit.
I'm curious. So like we talked about last time. Of course, like it's age cap, so it's like 18 plus, right? So you're
Mhm.
ostensibly playing with only adults, right?
Yeah.
But like, so you talked like some of your teammates before, or like the people who you were, I guess, reporting into, for lack of a better term,
Mhm.
for military. But you also, I would expect, you had people who were just run of the mill airsofters who might have milsim experience, right?
Oh yeah, we had actually talking to most of the guys. I was pretty surprised with the fact that a lot of them weren't from around here. Quite a few of them traveled from like North Carolina or other parts of Virginia here to play, and I was like, oh really? I don't know why that caught me off guard. I guess it's not that big of a jump, but yeah, most of
Mhm.
them weren't familiar with the field. A couple were. A couple were like some like Navy dudes and like a Coast Guard guy who were with us too, and they were pretty cool. But yeah, for the most part, it was just like 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids, or even in that case, there was a couple guys who were like freshly in the Army, like don't know anything because they're just little Joes, and they were there
Yeah.
too.
Yeah,
But
first to their BMQ or whatever. I guess boot camp, whatever you call it in the
yeah,
States. But yeah,
yeah,
like you just like wet between the ears kind of deal.
We had
exactly. Yeah.
And
a few
how
older
did you
guys
find
too.
like, I guess, coordinating and integrating with not just, so obviously, it's funny. I was talking to somebody else about this, but like all this different services, at least here in Canada, I'm sure it's probably similar in the States. You have different SOPs for different stuff, right? You
Mhm.
do stuff differently depending on what your job is, right? So I expect that that's different for you guys, but also obviously, if you're a civilian and you have like, if you're like me and you have no military experience, you don't have an SOP other than the one that
Yeah.
you've created by playing airsoft, right? So how did you
Mhm.
find integrating all of that during game day? Like, did that shake out as you expected?
Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, it seemed like most of the stuff they ran was what honestly, it seemed like most of it was straight out of like army doctrine rather than like any other branch. You know what I mean? Granted, all the branches kind of do everything in terms of like combat stuff. Branches like the army and the marines do stuff really similarly to where it
Mhm.
kind of it integrates well. But I think just and I my theory is just because the army's so big that that's generally what a lot of people do in terms of like SOP and doctrine to conduct events and like conduct movements and everything. But I mean, it was all pretty straightforward to where it seemed like most people who were there did have at least some MILSIM experience or generally knew what they were doing. Like
Hmm.
from our platoon, it seemed like most people knew what they were doing and like how to do it. I think
Yeah.
because we accomplished, I think all of our missions. Granted, we we got massacred on what the second one. Like six of us
Yeah.
made it back
That
alive,
was
but
brutal.
like
I was not one of them. I died like almost instantly in that ambush. But
yeah, I stayed alive. I was oh man, I had to hunker down. I was on like the front lines, just hunker down, shooting back at people. I looked back at a second, I saw all of you guys lay on the ground. I was like, why am I still here? I
yeah.
like ran,
Well,
like dipped out. I was like, can
so
anybody be revived here? He's like, no, we're all dead. I was like, bye. Just left.
there was there's this weird like kind of disconnect. So whenever you get ambushed, always if you're getting ambushed, you assault through the ambush and you clear through, or you break contact depending on how strong the enemy is. And now if somebody in front of you gets ambushed, you walk by them. You don't get in
Hmm.
that ambush, right? Because that's meant for one
Yeah.
person. You don't want to get bogged down. You still have a mission to continue. Some of the guys in our unit didn't understand that. And this was almost one of those instances, but more or less, there was like a constant thing of like when people get ambushed that day, they would just stop and like want to be, Rambo and run through the woods. It's like, bro, keep moving, keep moving. You have to
Yeah.
continue the mission. And that's when I got killed, is because there was a group of people in front of me. I got a little yelly and I was like, keep moving. And then I turn around and I get hit in the chest by a slew of BBs. And I'm like, oh, come on, man. So I just laid down. I was like, I'm tired. I need a break
Yeah.
anyways. Let me drink some water.
But it's interesting because that leads into a question that I had. I mean, we talked about the yelling aside, right?
Mhm.
Like this is you hinted at this as well earlier, Jimmy. Like you're saying, like this is similar to, and I forget the term that you had used, like base patrol, something
Yeah.
like that,
Patrol base
operations,
operations. Yeah.
patrol based operations. So one of the things that I'm curious about is like, obviously, like this is, it's basing itself on a reality that you may have experienced or that you did experience.
Mhm.
How did you find, aside from the fact that obviously nobody's getting killed playing an airsoft game,
Yeah.
right? But how did you find that you were getting into it? Like, did you find that you were being re-engaged in that space in your own mind, or was that really like you were just separating? You weren't getting no sort of confusion is the wrong word, but like getting those lines
Yeah.
blurred a bit.
No, so I would say at first I was kind of like, yeah, whatever, all right, whatever. But then it was almost like the first like pop when we got ambushed. I'm like, oh, that kind of brought something back, like in a good way. I was
Mm,
like, I'm getting amped up now. It's coming back. And then we get to the patrol base, and our PL and our squad leader are like, hey, we need to set security. And I look over, and everybody's just kind of like standing up, like kind of looking around. And I'm like, do you guys have like sectors of security? Like, when you go to a patrol base operations, you're all in either like a big triangle or a big circle. In this case, it was kind of like a big like cloud shape thing.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
kind of lumpy, but
Yeah. That's a good word for it.
you had like a second platoon here. This was our area of responsibility, third platoon, and then first platoon. So that's how it is in real life as well when you're doing a company size patrol base or anything of that nature. So everybody's just kind of standing around in groups, and I'm like, hey, dudes, let's make some fighting positions. And so I started grabbing guys and I started distributing them. I'm like, hey, man, instead of standing behind this tree that's this thin, why don't you push out 10 feet to that tree right in front of that road that's like this big? And you can lay down behind and get concealment, and you have a good, instead of pointing right over top of your buddy's shoulder, why don't you angle out at the side? So now we have two fields of fire going and stuff like that. And after I started putting people in places, I was actually surprised because everybody was listening. Like, nobody was like, nah, it's stupid, man. I'm just going to chill here. We even had dudes at one
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
I was like, let's make some fighting positions. Like, just kind of like get behind. Like, if you see a log over there, kind of like pull it over here so it's a little bit closer. And these dudes were building like log cabins over behind these trees. And I was like, I think it was RPL or platoon sergeant, whichever one Wally was, walks up to me. He's like, yo, are they building a fort? I was like, yeah. He's like, that's what's up. I'm like,
That's hilarious.
but yeah, so people were listening, and we had like a good, like, I don't know, I don't want to say chemistry, but we had like a good mentality. I guess I'll say that.
Hmm.
Everybody was open to consideration, including myself. Like, and then when we were conducting missions, and the big one, like during the mission that flipped in my switch, was the first platoon in front of us got ambushed, and our guys stopped and like went to assault. And I was like, no, get on the road, second platoon. And I started yelling. I was like, your second platoon, get on the road, push to the town. And then the guys in the back were doing the same thing because they were trying to run out. And so the platoon sergeant and the PL were running from the back, yelling the same thing. We're all like, get to the town and then continue on mission. And so from there, it kind of started to click of like, I don't want to get too far into this, but I also want this to go the correct way, and I don't want this to end up,
Right.
because there's that fine line of us like having the role play and pushing that narrative and then collapsing into a BB war the entire day and like a game,
Yeah.
a day game. So if you can just push these guys, push that narrative, then we can complete all the missions that we have to complete in the day, and then also have it all collapse into a BB war at the end and a big grand finale kind of thing, which is what happens in real
Yeah.
life training events too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Chris, from your perspective, I'm curious because I know your experience is not, the same as Jimmy's, right? So how did you experience that for yourself? And I know this wasn't like your first big milsim, but still, like same sort of question for you.
So it was pretty similar to what I did in the Army. The only difference for us was instead of walking, um, we did, because a lot of our stuff was supporting our Green Berets. So a lot of our stuff was vehicles. So we do a lot of
Mhm.
convoy operations instead of actual like walking. But the general layout of everything is kind of the same. You just put people in vehicles. So
Mm.
like the platoons each going out to do certain things, and the way like you move is the same thing as just you take like a platoon and you throw them into a group of like 4 or 5 vehicles and they go out that way. Obviously, the span of space that you're dealing with vehicles is a lot bigger, but I mean it worked because like realistically, like with our stuff, like if a vehicle goes down because of an ambush, like the rest of the vehicles can push past and provide support by fire, while the nearest element can actually go and like assess anybody who's down or injured or figure out what's going on.
Right.
So it was kind of similar with that, like Jimmy was talking about, where like one platoon would go down and you don't want to stop and get bogged down in an ambush, because a lot of it is like it's just a sideshow. That's not the point of it. And so like there was one time where it happened, and I think it was when we were supposed to go get the supplies in the parking lot, and
I was hoping you were going to bring that one up.
3/4 of the platoon like went after the enemy that was over in like a village that was supposed to be meant for third platoon. They were just slow and hadn't gotten there yet, and so they hit us as we were going, because it was basically like village was here, our route took us this way, and then third platoon is supposed to come here from this side of the village, and like they started to open fire on us. 3/4 of our platoon just like ran after them and tried to engage the enemy, and our platoon leader and and me and Jimmy were basically just like standing there like, this is a sideshow, we need to go. The whole point of them doing this is because they're stopping us from trying to get our supplies, because if we don't have supplies, we don't have any more ammo, and we only have what was given to us at the start, which was like 500 rounds, and people were already like low on ammo. We were having to like fish out some, so like we're like, we need the supplies, we need water, and we need ammo, we need to go get them. Like second platoon's job is to get the supplies. So basically it was like I pushed forward with, what was it? There were like 6 of us, and then our platoon leader, and then Jimmy and one other guy went back to get everybody else, and was like, "We need to go." And I was like, "We need to like." Our platoon leader was like, "Hey, you 6, like, let's go get the supplies, like, just to go see what's up." I'm like, "Yeah, we need to go. Like, we can't just sit here." Like, half of our platoon was like dead over there. They were like already hit.
Yeah.
Like we're not gonna go back and try to res these guys, and 1, almost get shot ourselves, and then 2, deal with the sideshow, because it's not our point. Like they're trying to stop us from getting supplies. So we pushed up with like 6 of us. We came and then grabbed supplies, and then on the way back, the whole platoon kind of met, and then that's when the ambush hit, like the big ambush that mask held like the rest of the platoon. Like that's when that hit was like, and obviously like they did it on purpose. They were trying to hit us when we had the supplies, like not knowing. Like they set up a little one around the supplies, which we took care of pretty quick, grabbed the supplies, and then started to leave. And I was just thinking, I was like, we need to go. Like we need to get out of here. I know what's going to happen. And so like as we were leaving, that ambush came, and I did what you're supposed to do. I was one of the point guys, and basically I started firing back, and I was just yelling at the rest of the platoon, like, go, 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 like run through me. I'll provide cover, and we'll break contact and just get all the stuff back. Like the stuff had already left because he loaded it in the gator, and it dipped. It was gone. Like our platoon leader goes, go back to the fob. We're not dealing with this. So he left. And so like, I was trying to get everybody to run through and everything, but like like Jimmy said, they stopped. They wanted a gunfight, and it's like, I get it. And like, there's that mindset of like airsofters that I don't think gets broken over a 1-day 7-hour milsim, where it's, these events are supposed to be objective based and not just like, hey, let's plasto blasto with each other for a few hours.
Yeah. And, you raise a really good point. And, we talked about this before, but like people hitting the airsoft field, they're doing that for fun, right? They want to go out there. They want to have a cool gunfight. And I've never been in a real gunfight, but I expect that, the consequences of that mean that you probably don't want to be in one if you can avoid it, right? Yes. Whereas in airsoft, it's like you're chasing that because it's like, man, that's when you feel cool, right? Yeah. As opposed to, the motivation of not getting in a real gunfight being that you get to go home and do whatever else you want to do, right?
Yeah. And one of the big things here that was really important, and this was one of the moments where I got real yelly, and I did whip out my very extensive vocabulary from 3 years in the infantry, and I started yelling at these guys because, like Chris said, they're like, oh, this is a BB war. This is a game. At one point, our platoon leader literally looks at me. He's like, bro, this wasn't even meant for us. This was meant for third platoon. Our lead guys got up there too quickly. Third platoon was supposed to come around the other side. Get them back. And I was like, boom, gone. So I start sprinting like an idiot, and I'm like, break contact. And you're like, what? Break contact. What? Break effing contact, get up. And I start yelling at people. I start like grabbing people by the shoulder. I'm like, get up, go, break contact. I get hit. Yeah. I fall down. That way, so when we were on that return mission with the supplies, the only reason we got mass-cowed is because everybody ran into that first gunfight. If we would have done what we were supposed to do and continued on mission, we would have all continued through that mission and completed it and been fine. In real life, you don't get 2 lives. You don't get 3 lives, right? So when you hit that first ambush and you get the order to break contact and you decide to do your own thing, boom, you get yourself killed and so many other people killed. right? And there's this idea and this situation where, like you said, it's like it's BB wars based. It's not objective based, and
Yeah.
it's that selfish kind of vibe where I'm going to be the hero. This is my chance to shine, and it got our entire platoon killed. And if this were like any other milsim event, that mission would have been a failure. And
Yeah.
even by the definitions of that event, we were supposed to say we're combat ineffective, but we were so close to the end there, we're like, just freaking run at this point. Like,
Yeah.
don't even
I
care about
forgot
pulling
about
security, run back to the base. But in all reality, right then and there, our platoon would have been done. Like, if we would have listened to the rules, we would have been
Mhm.
donezo, and third platoon would have had to pick up our slack, and who knows how many casualties they just took taking the village and taking over that ambush that hit us
Yeah.
that was meant for them. So
There's definitely a mindset thing that you're talking about there too. And I was talking to Rob from Gunfather Milsom about this last week. It's like, as an airsofter, like, you want to be the one who gets that, that kill, right? You
Mhm.
want to be the one who does the work, when in reality, you being the one who says something on the radio that helps your teammate get a kill is just as effective. Putting down fire so your teammate can break contact,
Yeah,
or breaking contact while your teammate puts down fire, is just as effective, because you're taking yourself out of the equation,
exactly.
right? And that's
Yeah.
really what you're talking about. And I think that's the biggest probably differentiator from what happens in, well, maybe not the biggest differentiator, that being
Yeah.
the lethal force of what you're doing, but like one of the big ones, which is that you're not thinking necessarily of yourself anymore. You
Mhm.
have to operate as a larger whole. And I think when we look at airsoft teams that are very successful, right, those are the ones who have that mindset of like, I don't care if I do it, if we do it, then I did it,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, totally. I totally feel that. One of the things we talked about, and I'm just curious about this because when we chatted about this, we're like, these types of events, stuff eventually goes sideways,
Mhm.
right? In terms of either the organization, which is legit because you're organizing an event and something doesn't go to plan, that happens, but also sometimes in terms of the leadership or the strategizing or what have you. And we were joking that like sometimes that happens sooner rather than later, right? So I'm curious what the experience was like for you guys. Was that basically right from the onset? You're like, oh, okay, no, or like did it sort of play out throughout the day?
Honestly, it didn't really. The organization definitely did not break down in
That's
terms
good.
of our
Mhm.
platoon. I the other ones, it was kind of like, honestly, it was the typical structure of like army. First platoon is like,
Yeah.
dude, they're just bad. They don't know what they're doing. Their leadership's constantly yelling at them. Second platoon's generally the platoon that's pretty squared away and knows what they're doing. And then third platoon's just the one that's like there. Half the time you're like, I don't know where they are, what they're doing. They're just kind of like there doing their
Mhm.
own thing. So like it was
Hmm.
kind of it broke down pretty similar to that. I would say higher up leadership did a great job. Like our CO and our XO did a pretty good job at stuff. Our platoon did really well. First platoon just kind of seemed like they didn't really know what they were doing.
They
The experience wasn't really there, I guess. I
yeah,
don't know,
they
Jimmy, how would you put it?
I would put it as, so the first mission that they got was kind of, it's a in real life it's one of the hardest, and in this case it was also one of the hardest because they had real role players, and they had to
Which
do
which one did they get?
they got KLE, key leader engagement.
Oh, that
So
was their first one. So
yeah,
they're the ones who pissed everybody off.
so they drew kind of the short stick on that, and it sounds fun, right? A KLE, or a key leader engagements, when you move into a town or province or wherever, and you meet all the key leaders of that area, and you try and get the skinny from them while also giving them the rundown of what it is we have to do, the things that we need, the cooperation we need to complete our mission, the kind of overview of our mission without giving them specifics so they can't ambush us, kind of thing. But our first operation was, oh wait, what was our first operation? I can't even remember now.
Um,
Was that?
ours wasn't to go to Cannibal Village, was it? Was that the first one we did, or was it the second one?
Oh, I don't remember.
I
Oh,
thought
that's a
that was the
blur.
first one
I
to get that intel, the videotape.
Was that the first? That might have been. I don't know, but I just remember first platoon kind of drew the short end of the stick on that one. So they got ambushed, and then the town villagers got pissed off, and it created a little bit of a not cool environment, which very, very quickly dissolved throughout the day. Pretty similar to like real life over a sustained period of time, condensed down into one day of 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, they like just straight up kidnapped a dude from the village and asked him questions in a container in our fob.
Oh wow.
It was
Some
very
enhanced interrogation.
exactly. It was very intense, but no, they did all right. I would say everybody did all right. The only issue I had was first platoon was a little bit of a mess, and then third platoon was very slow. They could do what you needed them to do. It's just somehow a second platoon being in the middle there, we always arrived where they needed to be like 10 minutes before they needed to be there.
Yeah.
Even though they were supposed to be moving in the complete opposite direction, we somehow got there before they did. I don't know. But no, I would say the overall command was pretty good. The mission set was clear, and the role players did a really good job of shaping that narrative, I think.
Yeah,
It'd be
those
funny. You'd
villagers
shoot a
fought
dude.
people.
You'd shoot a dude from behind a tree, and he'd go down, and that like conflict would end, right? And we'd retreat back to the fob. Then you'd go into the town. Next thing you know, that same dude's wearing a vest and a hard hat, acting like he's one of the logging crew, and you're like, "Hey, you're a terrorist." And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." Then he throws a grenade off the roof and blows you up, and
Oh my god.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. But I would say they did a pretty great job of organizing it and keeping it as like linear as you can, I guess, in that situation. It was pretty good. The tactics for we had an hour before we did this event where they gave us like, hey, this is how you move in a file. This is how you do a tactical column or a staggered column, is what we called it in the Army. This is how you do that on the road. When we take contact, you all get in a line and you push through the enemy. Stay 5 to 10 meters away, stuff like that. Here's how you search somebody who's hit. Fun stuff like that. And everybody throughout the day adhered to that. And I was also pretty impressed by that. People like listened. They took it pretty seriously. Some guys a little too seriously, maybe myself included there a couple times. But no, it was really
Takes
good.
one to know one, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's taking it
Yeah.
very seriously in different ways, I suppose.
Did you find that they did a good job at balancing sort of because obviously like it's probably pretty easy to take that like way too far in one direction, right?
Yeah.
Either being way too silly or way too serious, and like you're trying to deliver a fun experience at the same time as delivering that sort of simulationist aspect, right? How was the balance for that from the standpoint of someone who's used to serious exercises, like both in your careers and your experience?
It was
They did a
good.
good
I
job.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, the joking around too is like it happens all the time, even like in the Army on like FTXs and like real stuff, like deployments and everything. Like you'll joke around like mid patrol and like play grab ass and stuff like that. But like they did a good job at mixing that in with the seriousness of it, um, to where like it felt simulation, but at the same time it was BB wars because like they'd say that stuff and everything. But I think like Jimmy said, I think the villagers, the like NPCs, the key leaders, they did a great job at really integrating everything into it. Like they were they were getting pissed and like
They
screaming
threw hard
and
hats at
yelling
us. And
and
like,
threw hard at us. Dude, the one where you said there's a guy who threw a grenade out the second story at like a group. The only reason I didn't die was because one, he almost hit me in the head with it. It like slammed into the building I was next to, and like I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and I was like, "That's not good." I like ran around the corner, but like they were good. They had essentially villagers like get pistols from like the security locker and like shoot one of our guys and like run away into the woods and everything. But they did a great job at just like integrating everything to where like because the whole backstory was like they were Americans and it was kind of like we were searching their stuff like I don't want to say unlawfully, but like if people are shooting at you, like obviously like at that point it just goes out the window and you're like, no, trying to protect myself and
Yeah.
my brothers next to me. So like they did a good job at like, playing the whole like disgruntled Americans that like didn't want the government there and everything like that. So it really brought into that an aspect of just like kind of simulation, but at the same time, like those role players would like scream at you, yell at you, and then like because they worked for Bellhawk, and they'd be like, "How's your day going, man?" And you're just like, "Oh, I guess it's good. Yeah, I'm having fun."
There was
and like no one was getting pissed about that, right? Like everyone was cool, right?
Yeah.
Oh no,
cool.
no. It was everybody knew. People were like, honestly, people were trying not to laugh about it because they knew like it was part of the game, but it was actually really funny at the same time.
One of my favorite examples of this was very much so towards the end where everything was collapsing into chaos in the village. We had to go secure an machine, I guess, like a backhoe pretty much to get something up out of the ground that they had buried. And while we were bringing it back, people were like trying to block us and stuff like that, and they were like locking arms, like the very famous like protests and where they block like the roads and stuff like that.
Yep.
And they're like, "Hell no, we won't go. Hell no, we won't go." And they're chanting, like laughing and smiling. And then we start to deploy like tear gas grenades, just smoke grenades, and like everybody's having fun, having a good time until one of the ladies, as we're trying to break up the crowd, goes for our platoon leader's pistol, like legitimately reaches for it. And then one of the guys, me and Chris have been hanging around all day, pulls his pistol out and just gets this girl right in front of us, just like point blank, pop, 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 like shoots her. And, she plays dead and lays on the ground and stuff like that. Obviously out of the way of the backhoe. But like it's that mix of like at one point we had to detain and search people, and we were searching them, and one of the guys had his hands up on the wall and was sticking his butt out and like shaking his butt at the same time, being like, "You can't touch me, I have rights," and stuff like that. So no one took it too seriously, and everybody had a really good time with it. But at the same time, you're still getting that full experience of like, ah, man, so this is, I guess, in a way, what it's like, searching people and breaking up crowds in a fun way.
Yeah. And also it sounds like, the opportunity to apply some of these like, small unit tactics and like movement and principles and stuff like that, or choose not to and just rush into the ambush like, you're Rambo, whatever. It's up to you. Fair enough. But like, it's, I guess for someone who's never experienced that, especially like that's, giving you that 2% maybe of what that might be like, right? So I can totally see that. I'm curious, like we talked about your prep as well for going into the event. We talked about how like you had an op order or lack of op order, I guess, leading up into it. How did all that shake out for you guys? Like, were you good on everything that you needed by the time you hit the game day, I should say?
They didn't really do a big con op.
No, they kept it light.
Op at all.
Yeah. Our platoon did. Our platoon leader was cool, and he drew it out in the dirt with sticks and stuff like that. But as far as like an overall, they're like, "Hey, your Department of Justice, you got like terrorists and locals, go." And you're like, "Oh, all right."
The main thing they kept iterating was like, the main thing they were like was like, "Don't do the whole village." Like, don't just go into the village and start schwacking people because they look mean. Like, we definitely had like the ROE, and so like the ROE basically boiled down to if they had a weapon, they had to like point it at you and show hostile intent for you to actually drop them.
Hostile action, hostile intent. Yeah.
Yeah, like because the logging company had security guards with them who had weapons. So we couldn't just like, "Oh, due to the weapon." Like,
yeah, gotcha.
So that was one of the big things was the ROE that they kept preaching was, don't do the whole village and just go in there and just waste everybody.
Even though there was a little bit of a temptation to do it at points, we didn't though. At least not until the end. But we mostly just tear gassed all of them.
Hey man, I tried to give someone my Clip Bar and it didn't even work. I took my own damn food and tried to give it to somebody to calm them down.
Hearts and minds, baby. Is that what you guys call it?
Yeah, exactly. Hearts and minds, splatter them all over the floor. That's the goal.
Yeah, we'll take their hearts and take their minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just curious too, like about just thinking about like splatter. You got me thinking about like the actual like safety rules and stuff. Is that something that they covered on game day as well? Like, did you
Yeah.
all show up and do like a big safety brief
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
or
yeah, there was a safety brief before we went out. I also discovered that my rifle has an MED.
Whoops.
Yeah. So good thing I ranged it out to 190 feet.
Right.
I had like I think what was it, 20 or 25 feet MED, which like I thought in my head, I was like, this sucks. And then I was like, when am I ever going to engage somebody within 20 feet unless I'm like going into a house?
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Half the
Right.
time our platoon leader, I think, forgot all the time, even though I had bright yellow tape around my flash hider. But like, he'd be like, go with them into the building. I'm like,
Bro.
okay. Okay, I can't, but whatever. So I would like send 3 guys in and I would be like, you guys go. I have an MED. I'm going to stay out here. So I would actually stay and like watch the door and cover them as they moved inside, which you're supposed to do anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I wanted to go in so bad.
It was annoying because at one point where things started to dissolve, I took like a group of like 3 guys and we went building to building and we were clearing stuff. And at one point, there's a 3-story building you have to clear. And as you clear each level, I wanted to leave like a dude in security on each floor all the way up to the top and then go back down because there's a bunch of different rooms and closets and stuff like that in there. And I'm like, Chris, come here. He's like, I can't go inside. I'm like, you suck.
Yeah. You need a rubber knife, bud. That's it.
Exactly. I was like, just use your pistol.
I gotta do the hop up trick where you like you turn your hop up all the way off and it doesn't actually register your proper thing.
Oh no, that's bad. You can't be at that.
But
no, but you could do it the other way where you like put the you like put your hop up on further so that it just makes your gun shoot like super low because it's congesting it or something like that.
Yeah,
but either way, just use your sidearm. Like no big deal, right? Get a Token Marie, just slap that to your.
He didn't chrono his sidearm, so he couldn't use it.
I also didn't load it.
Okay,
you know what it was?
You got no excuse now. You're the soup sandwich now.
Exactly.
I got over to the chrono, like didn't have gas in it, and I was like, I'm not walking back to my car.
Like, bro, just get it in case you need it. He's like, I'm not going to use it. Whatever. Fine, leave it in the car.
Honestly, the gas pipe would have leaked out, and I would have been, SOL in a building.
I did get to pop a guy with my pistol, so I was pretty pleased with that.
Nice.
That was my goal the whole round. Nice. I'm like, I'm going to get a pistol kill. I'm going to get this. This dude ran up.
So describe it. How did... Yeah.
Next time, I'm just going to use my lower FPS. And dude, it was like 408 or 411 FPS. And the guy was like, man, you're over. I'm like, bro, I'm over by like 8. You really can't just be like, you're fine. Like at that point, I'm
limit is a limit.
Like,
that's how it goes.
At
least my opinion anyway, when it comes to safety, it's a hard stop. And I've had that be to my detriment too. Like I've showed up to the game and it's like, hey, how we measure in joules here? It's like, well, you're shooting 1.61 joules. And I was like, okay, well, I'm over. So I guess that's it. It's like 0.1 joule over. It's like, that's the limit. Sorry. I've turned people away for the same thing. So I'm not now going to be like, well, it's me, guys. Come on. It's like, nah, forget that.
The thing that bugged me is like, we usually do joules. I've only done joules. And that gun shoots, I think it's like 155 for joules is like the limit for AEGs, for like no MED. And I shoot around like, I'm usually at like 147. I'm fine. Every event I've been to, I've been fine. And I just used that previously at the Lion Claws game where they did it in joules and I was fine. And I come to Battle Hack and they like croted with 0.2s and I'm ripping it at like 417, 411. I'm just like, you know what I should have done was I should have re-chronoed with my other Mark 18, which I know shoots at like 380. And I should have just used that. And
yeah, like, you brought 3 guns and then just used the one that shoots over the limit. So
the MCX would have been over too. The MCX would have been like 4 something. So I should just use the other Mark 18 and been able to go into buildings with you. Now I know. Next time when I go to Battle Hack,
that's right. That's right. Bring all of them. Yeah. So when you think about this, when you think back to this, I mean, we covered a lot of ground about like what happened and stuff, but I'm curious, like for each of you, what is the standout moment? Like, what's the key gameplay moment for you where you were like, you felt like, yeah, I'm a hot shot right now, or this is the most fun I've had, or like the thing when you think back to this event, that's the one thing that sticks in your mind as like a huge positive?
Okay, I'll go
event.
first. I do have a moment because it let me relive my glory days for a moment. Uh, there was this mission where we had to assault the cannibal village. It's like just like a little fenced in area. But right before you get to it, the road to it, there on the other side of the bank, there's a berm, and we had
Mhm.
LMGs with us, like HPA
Oh, yeah.
LMGs, and our platoon sergeant like runs up. He's like, "Hey," he's like, "You're the army guy, right?" I'm like, yeah. He's like, "You know how to do support by fire?" And my eyes lit up because that's all I did when I was a machine gunner. I'm like, absolutely. He's like, "Can you like, if I give you the LMG guy, will you like set up a support by fire and give him firing commands?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so we go in and we set him this support by fire, and I'm like, all right, I'm giving this guy like firing commands, and then I realize he's not shooting anywhere close to where I was telling him to shoot. And then I realized, I'm like, oh yeah, this dude's like 55 years old, like carrying around this HPA tank, has no idea what I'm saying. And I'm like, I gotta dumb this down, and these don't act like real bullets. And they're not gonna
Mhm.
actually like dip their heads down when they hear this thing cut off like a real gun. And so as I'm like realizing this, I look over and our entire platoon's like dead. The enemy was not going down at all. They weren't like covering their heads. And I just look over and the platoon sergeant's like, "We need more guys. We're dying. Come on." And he's like waving the guys in the back forward because they don't know how to move up as we're shifting fire either. So they're just,
Mhm.
like popping a squat and shooting and then getting shot in the middle of the open. And so I'm like, oh man, so close. We were this close.
I would have paid good money to see your face when he was like, "Kid, do you know how to do support by fire?" I would have paid money to see that.
Jimmy had Tent City in his pants at that point. I'm gonna
I
tell
did.
you,
I
he
was
got so happy.
I was
It's
pumped.
like it's
Yeah.
like the absolute top of exhilaration and then the absolute bottom of despair once you realize what's actually happening, right?
I was like, all right, now give me like a 3 to 5 second burst, and he like holds down the trigger, and I realized like how anticlimactic it is with an airsoft gun. Instead of it being like doo, 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 like shaking the ground, kicking up dust, it's ee ee ee.
Yeah.
Bullets, and I'm like, oh man, come on,
That's
this
hilarious.
sucks. I was so upset, but
What about you, Chris? What's your standout when you think back to Hidden Archer?
Mm, probably two. Um, I'd say the first one was that when we went to get the supplies, because there were like six of us, I was running point and basically like kind of was like telling guys where to go, how to set everything up, and then same thing on the way out. Even though everybody died and nobody listened to me. But then the other one, definitely those KLEs. It was super fun, and like the villagers were trying to get into my face a lot because like my whole thing was like I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't go into any buildings that had an MED, so I was kind of like I was kind of pulling security for our leadership, for our platoon leader and our platoon sergeant, just in case anything happened. So I was out on the street with them, and like the villagers, like I would be off from them, away, just kind of like waiting. So like, the villagers would come up and like it was like one of the guys who worked there who'd always, it was a guy who always asked like, "How you doing, buddy?" Like that guy, and like another girl who was playing with the role player, and like they would always come up and like try to yell at me, and I just stare at them and then like look away and like not say anything because like I've done this so many times. Like I know how to deal with K leaders like when you're not supposed to talk to them, like and not give them any information. And they're like, "Silence isn't an answer." I'm like, "It's the only one I got." Like they were like, after that, they were kind of just like, "Okay." And they asked me like, "Who else can we pick on that'll be good?" And I was just like, "I don't know, pick somebody else." I was like, "I've done this so many times. You're not going to get me on this."
Well, I'm surprised you didn't throw Jimmy under the bus. Go pick on him, see how he reacts.
I didn't know where he was. Jimmy ran away.
Well, actually, interestingly enough, during that moment, well, I think it was actually right after that, another big part of my my other favorite thing that happened, I guess, was one of the moments where it was super cool for me was we were in that town. It was after the dude like threw the grenade and everything erupted into chaos. Was like
Oh, it was it was when the guy shot one of our guys and dipped out, right?
that one. our platoon sergeant runs up to me. He's like, "Hey man," he's like, "All right," he's like, "I know you got this, so get 2 dudes and go clear that building." And I'm like, "You got it. I do got this." It's like, you come here. We run up, they get killed instantly, like going through the door. But it was still cool. We finally cleared that 3rd story, and that's when I yelled at Chris. I'm like, "Yo, come here." And he's like, "I can't, I got an MED." And I'm like, "Stay there
Awesome.
then."
Everything's going well. My 2 guys are dead and you can't come in. Great. Awesome.
You're like, go get the other gun from the truck.
I was like, "Looks like it's just me." And then I go in and no one's there. They had already shot everybody, then left out the back entrance. So, yeah, that part was cool.
It's so
fun.
funny. It's so funny, hey, how like the different stuff that happens to us during a game to different types of players, that's their cool moments, right? And so like you have this moment where some guy comes up to you and is like, "Hey, you're the army guy, right?" And you're like, "Yeah, damn right I am." And like, you know, you have other guys who don't have that experience, who they have this other moment where some army guy, like the army guy, comes over and is like, "Hey buddy, I need you on a machine gun." And they're like, "Oh God, yeah, let's go." Right. And it's like different levels, but it's happening to everyone is getting like a different experience out of it, which I think is why airsoft ultimately is such a like a magical almost experience for lots of players, because you get to experience these things that you're even like in the video games you're never going to experience. That it's not the same. You really don't get that same experience, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So overall, would you go back?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think they have
No
one going
question.
on in September or something like that, and I'm like waiting for the day the tickets drop. I'm gonna sign up.
They do?
I think I saw something on their website about it. I haven't seen much more come out though. But
well, now I need to look this up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go. Wait, when?
Yeah,
in
it
September?
sounds.
I don't know. I think it's like early September or something like that. I'm not sure.
Well, we can't go, Jimmy, because we're going out to New Mexico.
Oh, that sucks. I'll go.
What? No, I mean
What?
you and I are going out to New Mexico.
For
I don't
Copperhead?
remember that.
Copperhead. That's Copperhead, American Milsim.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Never mind then. We're not doing that.
Just one thing that really strikes me as we talk about all of this. We talked about how, you know, this is more, it's not force on force. And I think one of the elements that probably gets removed in that type of situation, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is you don't have to worry about like, are people cheating, are people not cheating? Like, you know, you don't have that sort of experience as much, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was a little. The role players definitely were not calling their hits because I'd have to tag them like 17 times.
I do think like
But isn't that the point of the role players though?
Maybe within 20 feet.
I think like I think one of the things with that is especially towards the end, they were doing like an all out assault on our patrol base as like we had like 30 minutes left. So I think at that point they were just like, you know what? They were throwing smoke grenades everywhere. Like you couldn't see anything. You're like coughing and it's all the smoke's going in your face. And they're walking through the smoke and you're like tagging these dudes a bunch of times and they're just shooting back at you. And I think at that point it was just kind of like let's go for it. Let's give these guys one heck of a last, you know, one big last hoorah before they get out of here. You know, let's make it something they remember. Yeah. And throughout the day, it was kind of like that at certain points. Like you could tell there were parts of the story and of the enemy actions that they needed to happen in order for it all to continue and to shape the next part. Because like he said, you'd be shooting and some guys wouldn't go down, but then like they would when you're not like shooting at them. And so it's like they just needed like one last second so they could hide like this piece of intel or something like that on them. And so like at one point they booby trapped some stuff. And like, well, I remember this is when we were doing the support by fire. They were like trying to booby trap a case as we were like assaulting. So like a bunch of the guys that our machine gunner was like drilling were not calling their shots because I think they were still trying to mess with the booby trap to get it set up. But it didn't even go off either. But yeah, no, there were some points where they like weren't calling their hits, but I didn't so much care because it didn't detract from the experience, in my opinion. Because it's not force on force, you know. It's they have 30 guys and that's it. So
The other
They,
thing too is with them not calling it too is like they were simulating a much larger force, which it was supposed to be,
yeah,
but like
exactly.
it wasn't like they could just be like, we need 100 dudes out here to come like play against these 60. So like they were like, let's just get 30 that'll come play. That'll
Yeah,
be able
and
to like be fine getting hit multiple times, then like respawn and do it over again.
yeah, this was
Yeah, that's
their
fair.
first shot doing this. They'd never done like a milsim role play of this caliber before. This was their like they told us it was an experiment and trial run. They sent a huge survey
Yeah.
out afterwards that you had to complete, uh, and so I think that there was that thing of like, yeah, we only got like 30 dudes, so we got to sustain this firefight a little bit longer. So just take like 7 hits before you go down, or something like that,
Yeah.
because we
Right.
need these guys to stay here. Otherwise, they're going to complete this mission. They're going to be sitting around for 2 hours, waiting for everybody else to be done. So
Because
It's interesting. This sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I was gonna say because like Jimmy said, it was their first time doing it. They run what's called like Wild West, and they call it Rev, which is similar to like the Star Wars milsim, where like Rev is like apocalyptic time, and like they'll have buildings and saloons, and you're not always fighting each other. It's more like it's honestly more like you're running around in like apocalyptic Skyrim. Same thing with
Right.
Wild West. You're running around in like Wild West Skyrim, just like doing side missions and stuff like that. So this was like their first big thing at doing a mil sim style event.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's funny as you guys talk about this. It reminds me of an op that we ran in I think 2015, maybe 2016, which we called Last Crescent. But it was the same idea. Like we had our village field, and we made that into a forward operating base for NATO forces or whatever. And the entire day they were going outside the wire to do different kinds of missions, and the role players were like myself and the rest of the storm riders and a bunch of different volunteers, and there's 12 of us, and there's like 50 players, and it's like, well, you saw Phil and he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt, and now you saw Phil and he's wearing a lumberjack shirt, and technically those are two different people, but you sort of have to break that immersion. But yeah, to your point, sometimes you're like, oh well, I got to do this thing, or I gotta like I have another shirt in my pocket that when you hit me, I can fall over and then quickly put the shirt on and then scooch over and then start shooting at you from somewhere else to sort of simulate that. So I totally appreciate the challenges, like the logistic challenges of running something like that.
Phil,
Yeah,
you
it's
role players. I'll come up to Camp be one.
oh my god! Well, wait till you see what if I get the budget to pay for tickets to fly in, I'm actually going to be using that budget to fly down to you guys first, because you guys are already running those events.
I'll do it on my own dime.
Oh yeah, well wait till you see how expensive the tickets before you commit to that. You could take a lot of ski trips for that amount of money.
Miles.
Yeah, but it sounds like just like a really fun blend of like that, striking that really good balance of like good milsim but also good role playing. And it really sounds like it was put off, perfectly. I'm just curious, like, what is the post event like? Like, is there sort of a wrap up where you get everybody together and like, shake hands and bump elbows, or like, what is that like? Or does everybody just like go home?
No, they did an AAR afterwards.
Yeah. So yeah, it was kind of like everybody kind of like collapsed in at the end. And they're like, "Hey, good job, guys! Awesome work. Now we're gonna walk back." But like the walk back from Ballahack's like a mile and a half from like one end to the other. So like the entire time you're walking back, you're like joking around, chatting with these guys. Me and Chris are like going over. We're like, "Bro, did you see me do that? Did you see this?" And stuff like that. And then you get out to the parking lot. They had a raffle, which we ended up leaving because Chris had to go home back to North Carolina. We didn't want to stay too late, but they had like a raffle. They had like a whole thing. People won like guns and like pieces of gear and gift cards and stuff like that. So like they had a whole after thing. We just couldn't stay at that time. We had to get out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I would have stayed too, but like if I was able to like stay at your house again, I would have stayed.
Yeah.
That's really cool though. I think it's good for the like I guess the camaraderie or esprit de corps or whatever you want to call it, that you're building, especially in communities, when you have like these, for you guys, I guess, are smaller games, right? For us are absolutely huge, but regardless, 68 or 69 players, I guess, is like a huge event. Plus your volunteers and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So like that's a pretty big deal. So it's good to build that community so you can keep doing it. It certainly sounds like it was a banger. Like you might as well do it again kind of situation.
Oh, yeah.
Do the lessons learned and put it off another one. And like I would love to be able to attend that kind of event at some point. Like it's certainly on my list of things to do as I continue to explore my plans for travel to different games down south. So down south of where we are, not where you are. But yeah,
I mean, I'm
guys,
technically in the South of North
That's true.
Carolina.
I suppose, yeah. I've been down south of the United States. Like one time I was in Georgia, in
Oof.
Atlanta for 10 days or whatever. It was a really I'll save that story for later. But it was definitely a really cool experience.
Yeah.
One that I will never forget for sure. Well, like I said, I mean it's the kind of event that I would absolutely love to attend, and I am very grateful for both of you to come on for this episode and the previous episode to talk about this op and your experiences there. It sounds like it was a blast. So Chris and Jimmy, thank you so much for being here today. Guys, check out their podcast, BBs Don't Hurt. You can find it on Spotify and I guess wherever else you get your podcasts. And if you're interested in joining our Discord community, the link is in the description. We have an amazing community. You can find Chris there. You can have conversations with all kinds of players who are attending these types of events and events all around the world. So again, the link is in the description. Thank you so much for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you next week.